The first sign that something was wrong was the silence. Not the peaceful silence of the English countryside waking beneath a pale spring dawn. Not the gentle quiet that settled over fields before birdsong and sunlight claimed the day. This silence felt heavier. It pressed against Rosalind Whitmore's chest as the carriage rolled through the iron gates of Ravenshire Estate and into a world that seemed to be holding its breath. She had imagined this journey 100 times during the long weeks of preparation. In every version, servants lined the entrance steps. A steward greeted her with measured courtesy. The Duke of Ravenshire stood waiting beneath the grand portico, distant perhaps, reserved certainly, but present. Instead, as the carriage wheels crunched over the gravel drive, there was only mist drifting across the lawns and the looming silhouette of Ravenshire Hall emerging from the grey morning like something carved from memory. Rosalind adjusted her gloves and looked through the carriage window. The estate was magnificent. Vast stretches of manicured grounds unfolded on either side of the drive. Ancient oak trees stood watch over rolling green hills. The manor itself rose from the landscape in elegant stone tiers, its towers reaching toward a sky the color of pearl. It was beautiful. It was intimidating. And somehow, despite its grandeur, it felt lonely. The carriage slowed. Her stomach tightened. This was it. The moment she had been traveling toward for months. The moment that would determine the course of the rest of her life. Across from her, Lady Agatha Whitmore folded her hands in her lap and offered a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "You look pale, Rosalind." Rosalind returned the smile automatically. "I imagine most women would before arriving to marry a man they barely know." Lady Agatha's expression softened. "Your mother would have been proud of you." The word settled heavily between them. Rosalind looked away. Her mother had been gone for 6 years now. Sometimes the loss still surprised her. It arrived unexpectedly. In a familiar scent. A remembered phrase. A quiet morning like this one. She swallowed carefully. I hope she would have been. She would. Lady Agatha reached across the carriage and squeezed her hand. "You are doing what is necessary for your family." Necessary. It was an honest word. Not a romantic one. Not the word young ladies imagined when they dreamed of marriage. Yet it was the truth. 3 years earlier, Viscount Whitmore's investments had collapsed with alarming speed. Estates that had supported generations suddenly struggled beneath mounting debts. Land had been sold. Staff reduced. Repairs delayed. Appearances maintained through sheer determination. Rosalind had watched her father age nearly a decade in a single year. She had watched pride transform into quiet desperation. Then came the proposal. Not from the Duke himself. From his solicitors. A practical arrangement between two noble families. The Duke of Ravenshire required a wife. Her father required financial stability. It was all presented with remarkable politeness. As though lives could be rearranged as neatly as figures in a ledger. Rosalind had accepted. Not because she was forced. No one had forced her. She accepted because she understood what refusal would mean. She accepted because she loved her family. She accepted because sometimes duty arrived wearing the face of sacrifice. The carriage finally stopped. Rosalind drew a slow breath. Through the window she could see the grand entrance steps rising toward towering oak doors. No servants waited there. No welcoming committee. No Duke. Her unease deepened. A footman opened the carriage door. Cool morning air rushed inside. Lady Agatha descended first. Rosalind followed carefully, gathering her skirts as her boots touched the gravel. The estate stretched around her in perfect stillness. Somewhere in the distance a bell chimed. Otherwise, nothing moved. She turned toward the entrance. "Where is everyone?" Lady Agatha murmured. Rosalind wondered the same thing. The front doors opened at last. Relief flickered through her. A butler emerged. He was elderly, impeccably dressed, and carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who had served generations of aristocrats. Yet his expression looked strangely strained. He descended the steps and stopped before them. Lady Rosalind Whitmore. Yes. Welcome to Ravenshire Hall. He bowed. I am Mr. Pembroke, the estate steward. Rosalind waited. Surely the next sentence would explain everything. Surely the Duke would appear. Instead, Mr. Pembroke hesitated. The pause stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. Is something wrong? Rosalind asked gently. The steward's jaw tightened. His Grace has been delayed. Rosalind blinked. Delayed? Yes, my lady. When will he arrive? Another hesitation. We are uncertain. The words landed harder than they should have. Lady Agatha frowned immediately. Uncertain. A matter concerning estate business required his presence elsewhere. Elsewhere where? Lady Agatha pressed. Yorkshire, my lady. Rosalind stared at him. She had travelled across England to begin her life as Duchess of Ravenshire. She had arrived on the day arranged months in advance. And the Duke was not here. For a brief moment embarrassment flushed through her. Ridiculous embarrassment. As though she had arrived at a gathering where no one expected her. She forced herself to remain composed. I see. Mr. Pembroke inclined his head. His Grace regrets the inconvenience. The inconvenience? Rosalind nearly smiled at the absurdity of the phrase. She had agreed to marry a stranger. Travelled hundreds of miles. Left behind everything familiar. And apparently this was merely an inconvenience. Yet she found herself strangely calm. Perhaps because there was nothing else to be. Becoming upset would not summon the Duke home. Thank you, Mr. Pembroke. Her voice remained steady. I am certain there is an explanation. Relief flickered briefly across the steward's face. You are most gracious, my lady. Lady Agatha looked considerably less gracious. Rosalind touched her aunt's arm lightly. There would be time later for private frustration. Public dignity mattered. Especially now. Mr. Pembroke led them inside. Ravenshire Hall was even more impressive within. Marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers. Portraits lined the walls. Generations of Ashcroft dukes watched silently from gilded frames. Yet despite the luxury, something felt absent. Houses reflected the people who lived within them. This one felt carefully maintained but emotionally abandoned. As though joy had once resided here and quietly departed. Rosalind noticed small details. Fresh flowers appeared nowhere. Several rooms they passed stood closed. The air felt still. A little too still. She wondered how long the Duke had been a widower. 3 years. That was what she had been told. 3 years since the death of his wife. 3 years raising 3 children alone. 3 years avoiding nearly every attempt by society to secure him another marriage. Mr. Pembroke guided them toward a drawing room overlooking the eastern gardens. Sunlight filtered through tall windows. Tea had been prepared. A fire crackled softly in the hearth. You may rest here, my lady. Thank you. The steward bowed again. Then, unexpectedly, he seemed reluctant to leave. Is there something else? Rosalind asked. Mr. Pembroke cleared his throat. Only that, the children have been informed of your arrival. Rosalind paused. The children? Yes, my lady. A faint smile touched his expression for the first time. They have been quite curious. Before Rosalind could respond, a distant sound echoed through the corridor outside. Running footsteps. Fast footsteps. More than one pair. Mr. Pembroke closed his eyes briefly as though surrendering to an inevitable outcome. The drawing room doors burst open. 3 children stood in the doorway. A girl of perhaps 11. A boy around 8. A much smaller girl clutching a stuffed rabbit. All 3 stared directly at Rosalind. Silence filled the room. The older girl stepped forward first. She had dark hair. Intelligent grey eyes. The cautious expression of a child accustomed to disappointment. The boy folded his arms. clearly suspicious. The youngest simply looked curious. Rosalind rose slowly. "Hello." None of them replied immediately. They continued studying her with remarkable intensity. Finally, the little girl tugged on her sister's sleeve. "Is that her?" she whispered. The older girl nodded. The smallest child looked back at Rosalind. Then she asked the question that would change everything. "Are you going to leave too?" And suddenly the silence of Ravenshire Hall made perfect sense. Rosalind did not answer immediately. The little girl's question lingered in the air long after the words themselves had faded. "Are you going to leave too?" It was not the sort of question a child asked casually. Nor was it the question of a child who expected reassurance. It sounded practiced. As though disappointment had visited often enough to become familiar. The smallest girl stood clutching her worn rabbit against her chest, waiting with solemn patience. Beside her, the older children watched carefully. Measuring. Judging. Hoping not to hope too much. Rosalind felt something tighten quietly inside her heart. She lowered herself until she was nearly at eye level with the child. "I only arrived a few minutes ago," she said gently. Leaving would seem rather foolish. The little girl's brow furrowed as she considered this. Then, unexpectedly, she nodded. "That makes sense." A faint smile touched Rosalind's lips. The older girl did not smile. People say things before they leave. The statement was delivered calmly. Almost academically. Which somehow made it sadder. Rosalind turned her attention to her. "And what is your name?" "Emma Ashcroft." The girl straightened slightly. "I am 11. A very important age." "I suppose." The answer carried a maturity that seemed beyond her years. The boy stepped forward next. "I am Samuel." He folded his arms tighter. "I am 8. It is a pleasure to meet you, Samuel." "Is it?" Rosalind blinked. The boy's expression remained serious. Lady Agatha covered a cough suspiciously close to a laugh. Rosalind managed to maintain her composure. "Yes." Samuel seemed disappointed by her answer. As though he had hoped to provoke a stronger reaction. The smallest girl finally lifted her rabbit higher. "I am Lucy." "And who is this?" Rosalind asked, nodding toward the rabbit. Lucy gasped softly. "You do not know." "I am afraid I do not." "This is Captain Flopsy." Rosalind immediately adopted an appropriately serious expression. "Then I must apologize to Captain Flopsy." Lucy appeared satisfied with this response. Mr. Pembroke watched the exchange with visible relief. Perhaps the children should allow Lady Rosalind time to settle in. 3 pairs of eyes immediately shifted toward him with identical expressions of resistance. It was the first moment Rosalind truly noticed the family resemblance. Emma's grey eyes. Samuel's stubborn jaw. Lucy's dark hair. All unmistakably Ashcroft. "We are helping," Emma informed the steward. "By interrogating our guest. By learning whether she is nice." Mr. Pembroke looked as though he had no adequate response to this logic. Rosalind rescued him. "And have you reached a conclusion?" Emma studied her thoughtfully. "Not yet." Samuel nodded. "The jury is still deciding." Lady Agatha pressed her lips together very firmly. Rosalind suspected her aunt was fighting another smile. "A sensible approach," Rosalind replied. "One should never rush important decisions." That answer seemed to earn a small measure of approval. Emma glanced toward the tea service. "Have you eaten?" "Not since early morning. The cook always sends too many cakes." Emma turned toward the side table. "You should have one." "Emma," Mr. Pembroke began. "She should." Emma looked back. "She traveled all day yesterday." The steward blinked. "How do you know that?" "Everyone knows that." Mr. Pembroke wisely surrendered. Rosalind accepted a small cake mostly because refusing seemed impossible under such scrutiny. Lucy immediately climbed onto a nearby chair. Samuel claimed another. Emma sat across from Rosalind with the air of someone conducting an official interview. Lady Agatha watched the proceedings with growing amusement. "Where did you come from?" Samuel asked. "Kent." "Is it boring?" "Not entirely." "Have you ever climbed a tree?" Rosalind hesitated. "Once." Samuel narrowed his eyes. "Only once." "I was caught." For the first time, the boy grinned. A genuine grin. Quick and bright. Gone almost immediately. "What happened?" "My governess informed me that ladies were not supposed to climb trees." "Did you stop?" "For several months." Samuel's grin returned. Emma rolled her eyes. "You encouraged him." I answered honestly. Lucy leaned forward. "Do you know how to braid hair?" Rosalind touched her own dark blonde curls thoughtfully. "Reasonably well." "Better than Papa?" The room fell unexpectedly quiet. Rosalind noticed it immediately. So did Emma. So did Samuel. Lucy, however, remained blissfully unaware. "I imagined so," Rosalind answered carefully. "Papa is terrible at it." Lucy sighed dramatically. "Very terrible." Emma's expression softened for just a moment. "He tries." "That does not help." Lucy held up a tangled lock of hair as evidence. Something about the exchange warmed the room. It was easy to picture the Duke attempting tasks he had never expected to perform. Difficult tasks. Everyday tasks. The small practical duties usually managed by a mother. Rosalind found herself wondering what kind of man Nathaniel Ashcroft truly was when no one was watching. Society described him in broad strokes. Powerful. Wealthy. Reserved. A widower. Yet people rarely fit neatly inside reputations. "Papa says braids are impossible," Lucy continued. "Papa sounds wise." "Papa says many things." Emma's tone carried affection despite her composure. The conversation continued. Questions arrived from every direction. Some serious. Some ridiculous. Rosalind answered each as honestly as she could. The children gradually relaxed. Even Samuel's suspicion began to fade. After nearly an hour, tea had been abandoned entirely. Lucy now sat beside Rosalind instead of across from her. Samuel had launched into a detailed explanation of a failed attempt to build a treehouse. Emma occasionally corrected details whenever the story drifted too far from reality. For the first time since arriving, Ravenshire Hall felt less empty. Then the atmosphere shifted. The change was subtle. A servant entered quietly and approached Mr. Pembroke. He whispered something. The steward's expression darkened. Rosalind noticed immediately. So did Emma. "What is it?" Emma asked. Mr. Pembroke hesitated. "Nothing that need concern you." "That means it concerns us." The girl spoke with startling certainty. The steward sighed. "A message has arrived from His Grace." The children became instantly attentive. Lucy brightened. "Papa is coming home." Mr. Pembroke paused. Too long. Much too long. Emma's shoulders stiffened. Samuel looked away first. Lucy's smile slowly disappeared. Rosalind felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. "His Grace has been delayed further," Mr. Pembroke said quietly. Silence followed. Not dramatic silence. Not shocked silence. Something worse. Familiar silence. The kind that arrives when disappointment has happened before. Lucy lowered her eyes to Captain Flopsy. Samuel stared at the carpet. Emma remained perfectly still. Rosalind suddenly understood why the little girl's question had sounded so practiced. "Are you going to leave too?" It had never been only about her. It had been about absence itself. About people who meant well but never seemed to stay. About promises interrupted by obligations. About waiting. Emma rose first. "Thank you for informing us." Her voice sounded older than 11 years should allow. She turned toward the door. Samuel followed immediately. Lucy remained seated for a moment longer. Then she slid quietly from her chair. Rosalind's heart ached unexpectedly. Lucy! The little girl stopped. Yes? Rosalind hesitated. She had no right to make promises. No right to offer certainty she could not guarantee. Yet she could offer one truth. I will still be here tomorrow morning. Lucy searched her face carefully. Children often recognized sincerity faster than adults. After several seconds, she nodded. Good. Then she hurried after her siblings. The drawing room fell silent once more. Mr. Pembroke looked exhausted. Lady Agatha watched the closed door thoughtfully. Those children have been disappointed too often. Rosalind stared at the doorway where they had disappeared. Yes. And yet they wanted to meet you. Rosalind considered that. It was true. Despite everything, they had come. Despite caution. Despite uncertainty. Despite old hurts they were far too young to carry. They had come. Outside the tall windows, afternoon sunlight stretched across the gardens. Somewhere beyond those distant hills, the Duke of Ravenshire remained absent. Yet inside the great lonely house he had left behind, 3 children had already begun changing everything. And Rosalind was no longer quite certain that she had come to Ravenshire merely to become a duchess. The following morning, Rosalind woke before sunrise to the unfamiliar sound of crows calling across the estate. For a few moments she lay still beneath embroidered blankets, disoriented by the high ceiling above her and the soft glow of dawn filtering through heavy curtains. Then memory returned. Ravenshire Hall. The absent Duke. 3 children with old disappointments hidden behind young faces. She sat up slowly. A thin veil of mist drifted across the gardens beyond her window. The estate looked almost dreamlike beneath the pale morning light. Beautiful. Quiet. Lonely. That word continued returning whenever she thought of Ravenshire. Lonely. Not neglected. Not cold. Simply lonely. As though everyone inside the great house had become accustomed to living around an absence that never truly left them. By the time she joined Lady Agatha for breakfast, the household had already begun its daily rhythm. Servants moved efficiently through corridors. Fires crackled in distant rooms. Somewhere a clock chimed the hour. Yet the atmosphere remained subdued. Rosalind noticed it more clearly now. Voices were lower here. Laughter rarer. Even footsteps seemed softer. As though the house itself encouraged restraint. Lady Agatha stirred her tea thoughtfully. You are thinking about the children. Rosalind smiled faintly. Is it so obvious? Extremely. Rosalind glanced toward the window. Lucy expected disappointment before it happened. Children learn from experience. That is exactly what troubles me. Lady Agatha nodded. Neither woman spoke for several moments. Finally Rosalind set down her cup. I should like to explore the house. Her aunt raised an eyebrow. Investigating already. Observing. That sounds suspiciously similar. Rosalind laughed softly. Perhaps it did. Yet she felt drawn to understanding the place. Houses revealed their inhabitants if one paid attention. Ravenshire was hiding something. Not a scandal. Not necessarily a secret. Something emotional. Something unfinished. After breakfast she began wandering through the estate. The library came first. It occupied nearly an entire wing and contained thousands of volumes. Leather bindings lined floor-to-ceiling shelves. Sunlight spilled through towering windows. The room smelled of paper, wood polish, and history. Several books lay open on a side table. Children's books. Recently used. Rosalind smiled. Samuel perhaps. Or Emma. A few rooms farther on she discovered a music room. A grand piano stood near the windows. Dust had settled lightly across the polished surface. Not enough to indicate abandonment. Just enough to suggest infrequent use. She pressed one key gently. A single note echoed through the empty room. Then silence returned. As she moved deeper into the manor, the pattern repeated. Beauty everywhere. Signs of life. Signs of care. Yet also signs of retreat. Rooms that had once hosted gatherings now stood quiet. Drawing rooms prepared for guests who rarely came. Corridors that felt larger because too few people walked them. Near midday she found herself standing before a long gallery filled with family portraits. Generations of Ashcrofts gazed down from ornate frames. Dukes. Duchesses. Military officers. Statesmen. Elegant women in silk gowns. Serious men in formal attire. The history of an ancient family stretched along the walls. Rosalind moved slowly from portrait to portrait. Then she stopped. Something was wrong. At the center of the gallery hung a large frame concealed beneath a dark velvet covering. The cloth had been secured carefully. Deliberately. Not temporarily. Permanently. The hidden portrait immediately drew her attention. Every other painting remained visible. Only this one had been covered. She stepped closer. The frame itself was magnificent. Larger than most surrounding portraits. Important. Significant. Yet whatever image it contained had been hidden from view. You found it. Rosalind turned. Emma stood at the far end of the gallery. She held a book against her chest. Her expression revealed little. Found what? Rosalind asked gently. Emma walked forward. The portrait nobody talks about. The girl's voice remained calm, but Rosalind sensed tension beneath it. She looked back at the covered painting. Who is it? Emma stopped beside her. For several seconds she simply stared at the draped frame. My mother. Rosalind felt her breath catch. Of course. The answer should have been obvious. Yet hearing it spoken aloud changed everything. I see. Emma's gaze never left the portrait. It used to hang in the drawing room. Why was it moved? Papa moved it. The words were simple. Their meaning was not. Rosalind waited. Eventually Emma continued. After she died. The corridor seemed quieter than before. Was it painful for him? Emma shrugged. It was a remarkably adult gesture. Maybe. And for you? Emma finally looked at her. Grey eyes. Intelligent eyes. Old eyes. Eyes that had witnessed more grief than childhood should require. Nobody asked me. The honesty of that answer landed heavily. Rosalind felt an ache she could not quite name. Then I shall ask now. Emma appeared surprised. Not dramatically. Just enough for Rosalind to notice. What do you mean? Was it painful for you? For a moment the girl's composure wavered. Only a moment. Yes. The single word emerged quietly. Very. Rosalind nodded. She did not offer false comfort. Children deserved better than that. They deserved truth. I imagine it was. Emma stared at her for several seconds. Evaluating again. Measuring. The way she had on their first meeting. Finally she looked back toward the portrait. Lucy barely remembers her. And Samuel. Some days he remembers too much. Rosalind understood immediately. Different children carried grief differently. Some forgot details. Others held on so tightly they could not move forward. What was she like? Emma smiled unexpectedly. A real smile. Brief but genuine. She sang badly. Rosalind blinked. Emma's smile widened slightly. Very badly. Surely not. Terribly. Then perhaps musical talent skipped a generation. Papa says the same thing. For a moment warmth entered the conversation. Then it faded. Emma's gaze returned to the hidden portrait. Everyone talks about how beautiful she was. Was she? Yes. The answer came instantly. But that is not what I remember. What do you remember? Emma was quiet for a long time. She always knew when somebody was sad. The words lingered between them. Rosalind found herself looking at the covered frame differently now. Not as a mystery. Not as a symbol. As a mother. A woman whose absence still shaped every corner of Ravenshire Hall. A woman whose children still carried pieces of her. Footsteps echoed from somewhere below. Emma glanced toward the staircase. We should go. Yet neither moved immediately. Rosalind looked once more at the hidden portrait. Something felt wrong. Not merely the fact that it had been covered. The entire situation felt strange. Families preserved memories. Especially in aristocratic houses where lineage and history mattered deeply. Hiding such a portrait seemed unusual. Almost deliberate. Almost defensive. As though looking at the image had become impossible. Does anyone ever uncover it? Rosalind asked. Emma's expression changed. Not fear exactly. Something closer to discomfort. No. Never? Never. Rosalind studied her carefully. You sound very certain. Emma hesitated. Then she lowered her voice. Because nobody is allowed. A chill moved quietly through Rosalind. By whose order? Papa's. That surprised her. The Duke had hidden the portrait. The Duke had forbidden its removal. The Duke had left it untouched for 3 years. Why? Grief explained part of it. Not all of it. There was something else here. Something she could not yet see. Emma shifted uneasily. Come on. Emma. The girl paused. Yes? Rosalind glanced toward the concealed painting. Do you think your father still misses her? Emma looked at the portrait for a long moment. When she finally answered, her voice was almost a whisper. I do not think that is the right question. Rosalind frowned slightly. What is? Emma swallowed. I think the question is whether he ever stopped blaming himself. Before Rosalind could respond, Emma turned and walked away. She disappeared down the corridor without another word. Rosalind remained where she was. Alone beneath the watchful eyes of generations long gone. Her gaze settled once more upon the hidden portrait. A mother remembered. A wife mourned. A painting nobody could see. And for the first time since arriving at Ravenshire Hall, Rosalind began to suspect that the silence surrounding the former Duchess of Ravenshire was not simply grief. It was something deeper. Something the entire household had learned not to discuss. Something still lingering beneath the surface after all these years. As she turned to leave, a faint movement near the bottom edge of the velvet covering caught her attention. She stepped closer. Only an inch of canvas remained visible where the fabric had shifted slightly over time. Most people would never have noticed it. Rosalind almost missed it herself. Yet now she could see the smallest fragment of the hidden painting beneath. Not enough to reveal a face. Not enough to reveal an identity. Only a pale hand resting against dark fabric. And in that painted hand, barely visible through years of concealment, was a folded letter. The image of the painted letter stayed with Rosalind long after she left the gallery. It followed her through luncheon. Through polite conversation with Lady Agatha. Through an afternoon that should have felt ordinary but somehow did not. There was something unsettling about discovering a clue hidden inside a portrait nobody was allowed to see. Not because it suggested scandal. Life rarely unfolded like the sensational novel sold in London bookshops. What unsettled her was the emotion surrounding it. Every mention of the former Duchess seemed wrapped in careful silence. The servants grew cautious. Emma became guarded. Even Mr. Pembroke chose his words with unusual care. By evening, rain had arrived. Soft drops tapped against tall windows while clouds darkened the Yorkshire sky. Ravenshire Hall felt even larger after sunset. Candlelight softened corridors and turned distant corners into pools of shadow. Rosalind found herself in the schoolroom shortly after supper. Lucy sat beside her at a small table, concentrating fiercely on a spelling exercise. Samuel occupied a chair near the fireplace with a book balanced upside down in his lap. Emma worked quietly near the window. The arrangement had developed naturally over the past 2 days. No one had suggested it. No one had planned it. Yet somehow the children kept finding reasons to appear wherever Rosalind happened to be. "Captain Flopsy cannot spell," Lucy announced suddenly. Rosalind glanced toward the rabbit. "That is unfortunate. Very unfortunate." Lucy nodded solemnly. "He is trying his best. I admire his determination." Samuel snorted without looking up. "He is a rabbit." "You are jealous," Lucy informed him. "Of a rabbit. Captain Flopsy is much more popular than you." Samuel finally lowered his book. "That is because he never talks." Lucy gasped. Emma pressed a hand against her mouth to hide a smile. Rosalind noticed it immediately. Emma smiled more often now. Not frequently. Not freely. But more often than when they first met. It felt like watching sunlight slowly return after a long winter. A knock sounded at the door. Mr. Pembroke entered carrying several documents. "Forgive the interruption." "You are never interrupting," Rosalind replied. The steward smiled politely. "His Grace's solicitor has forwarded additional papers concerning the marriage settlement." The room immediately grew quiet. Rosalind noticed Emma stiffen. Samuel looked away. Even Lucy seemed to sense the shift. Marriage. The word carried different weight here. Not excitement. Not anticipation. Uncertainty. Mr. Pembroke placed the papers on a nearby desk. "There is no urgency." "Thank you." He bowed and departed. The moment the door closed, silence returned. Lucy resumed her spelling. Samuel returned to pretending he was reading. Emma did neither. She stared at the papers for several seconds. Then she spoke. "Do you want to marry Papa?" The directness nearly made Rosalind laugh. Nearly. Instead, she considered the question carefully. "That is a complicated matter." "Why?" Emma asked. "People usually know." "Not always." Emma folded her hands together. "Papa does not want to marry anyone." The statement was delivered with complete certainty. Rosalind suspected it was true. Perhaps circumstances sometimes require difficult choices. That sounds like something grown-ups say when they are unhappy. Samuel muttered the observation from across the room. Rosalind looked at him. The boy was still staring at his upside-down book. She suspected he knew exactly what he was doing. "You may be correct." Samuel appeared pleased by the admission. Emma remained thoughtful. "Mama used to say people should only marry if they would miss each other terribly." The room became very still. Lucy lowered her pencil. Samuel stopped pretending to read. Even the rain seemed quieter beyond the windows. Rosalind chose her next words carefully. "Your mother sounds wise." Emma looked down. She wrote it in a letter once. Every instinct sharpened. Rosalind kept her expression neutral. "A letter?" Emma nodded. "To Papa." Samuel immediately sat upright. "Emma." "What?" "We are not supposed to talk about that." Emma frowned. "Why not?" "Because we are not." The exchange happened quickly. Too quickly. Like a familiar argument. Rosalind's pulse quickened. "What letter?" Both children became silent. Emma looked toward the fireplace. Samuel looked toward the floor. Lucy looked confused. The reaction alone told Rosalind everything she needed to know. The letter mattered. Very much. "You do not have to answer," she said gently. Emma hesitated. "There was a letter." "From your mother?" A small nod. "Where is it now?" Samuel stood abruptly. "Nobody knows." The answer came too fast. Too forcefully. Emma stared at him. "That is not true." Samuel's face reddened immediately. "Emma." "It is not." Rosalind remained very still. The tension between the siblings felt real. Old. Rooted in something deeper than childish disagreement. Emma looked back toward Rosalind. Mama wrote a letter before she died. The words emerged quietly. For Papa. Rain continued tapping softly against the glass. Rosalind could hear every drop. Did he receive it? Emma's expression changed. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. I do not know. Emma. Samuel sounded genuinely uncomfortable now. Stop. But Emma shook her head. No. She turned fully toward Rosalind. Nobody talks about it anymore. About the letter. About any of it. The girl swallowed. After Mama died, everyone acted strange. Rosalind listened carefully. Emma rarely spoke this openly. What do you mean? Papa stopped smiling. Samuel lowered his eyes. Lucy quietly hugged Captain Flopsy. Emma continued. The portrait disappeared. Rooms were closed. People whispered. Her voice softened. Then one day the letter was gone too. A chill moved through Rosalind. Gone. Emma nodded. I saw it once. Samuel closed his eyes. Emma. I did. She looked at her brother. You know I did. He said nothing. Where? Rosalind asked gently. Emma frowned in concentration. The chapel. That surprised her. The family chapel. Yes. Why was it there? I do not know. Emma looked frustrated by her own lack of answers. I was little. Little. Yet apparently old enough to remember details others wished forgotten. What happened afterward? Emma's gaze drifted toward the rain-streaked windows. It disappeared. And no one looked for it. Papa did. The answer came from Samuel this time. Quietly. Almost reluctantly. Rosalind looked at him. The boy stared into the fire. For a long time. Something about the way he said it made her heart ache. Children notice more than adults realized. They noticed grief. They noticed guilt. They noticed absence. Samuel had clearly seen all three. Did he find it? Rosalind asked. Samuel shook his head. No. Silence settled over the room once more. Not uncomfortable silence. Reflective silence. The kind that followed old memories. Finally Lucy climbed down from her chair. She crossed the room and settled beside Rosalind. I do not remember Mama very much. The confession was small. Fragile. I remember her hands. Rosalind wrapped an arm gently around the child. That is a lovely thing to remember. Lucy nodded against her shoulder. They were always warm. No one spoke for a while. The fire crackled softly. Rain continued falling outside. Somewhere deep within Ravenshire Hall, a grandfather clock marked the passing hour. Rosalind found herself thinking about the hidden portrait. The painted letter. The missing letter. The chapel. The grief that still lingered after 3 years. Too many pieces connected. Too many questions remained unanswered. Eventually Emma gathered her books. Samuel followed suit. Lucy yawned dramatically. Bedtime arrived. One by one the children departed. Yet just before Emma reached the door, she paused. Rosalind. It was the first time she had used her given name instead of a formal title. Rosalind noticed immediately. Yes? Emma hesitated. If you ever find the letter. Her voice faltered. Please tell me what it says. Then she left before Rosalind could answer. Long after the schoolroom stood empty, Rosalind remained beside the dying fire. She stared into the flames and thought about a mother nobody discussed. A portrait nobody uncovered. A letter nobody could find. And for the first time, she wondered whether the greatest mystery at Ravenshire Hall was not how the former Duchess had died. It was what she had been trying to say before she was gone. The next week passed with surprising speed. What began as cautious introductions gradually settled into something that felt dangerously close to belonging. Rosalind noticed the change first in the mornings. On her second day at Ravenshire Hall, breakfast had been a formal affair shared only with Lady Agatha. By the seventh day, she rarely sat alone for more than a few minutes before Lucy appeared carrying Captain Flopsy beneath one arm. Samuel arrived pretending he had not deliberately chosen the same breakfast hour, and Emma quietly claimed her usual chair near the window. No one announced these routines. They simply happened. The same way flowers gradually turned toward sunlight without realizing it. On a bright morning filled with early summer warmth, Rosalind found herself seated beneath an ancient oak tree overlooking the southern gardens. A basket of books rested beside her. Lucy occupied a blanket nearby. The child was conducting what appeared to be an extremely serious tea party involving Captain Flopsy and 3 unfortunate daisies. "The rabbit is being rude again," Lucy informed her. "That is disappointing." "Very." Lucy sighed heavily. "He keeps interrupting everyone." Rosalind nodded solemnly. "Perhaps he requires better manners." Lucy considered this. "Or less cake." Before Rosalind could respond, a sudden shout echoed across the lawn. Samuel came running over the grass as though pursued by an entire cavalry regiment. His dark hair was disheveled. His coat hung open. Excitement radiated from every movement. "Emma says it cannot be done." Rosalind blinked. "Good morning to you as well." "Good morning." He paused briefly. "Emma says it cannot be done." "I gathered that." Samuel pointed dramatically toward the orchard. "Come." Rosalind had already learned that resistance was generally futile when Samuel reached this level of enthusiasm. "Lead the way." They crossed the lawn together. Lucy abandoned her tea party immediately and followed. Captain Flopsy apparently approved of adventure. Emma waited near the orchard fence with an expression that suggested she regretted becoming involved. "Tell her," Samuel demanded. Emma folded her arms. "I told him the branch will not support his weight." "You said I would fall." "I said physics would win." Rosalind glanced between them. "What exactly are we discussing?" Samuel pointed toward a large apple tree. One branch stretched nearly 15 feet above the ground. A weathered kite hung tangled among the leaves. "I can reach it." Emma looked heavenward. "You absolutely cannot." "Can too." "Cannot." Lucy looked at Rosalind. "They have been arguing for 20 minutes. 23, Emma corrected. Samuel immediately climbed the lower trunk to prove his point. Rosalind watched him carefully. "Samuel." "I know." He stopped climbing. "No broken bones." "An excellent rule." The boy grinned. He climbed back down. Emma looked relieved despite her attempt to hide it. Rosalind studied the tree thoughtfully. Then her gaze shifted toward a nearby gardening shed. Several minutes later she emerged carrying a long ladder. Samuel's eyes widened. "You are brilliant. Do not tell your aunt." "Why?" "She already worries enough." The operation required teamwork. Samuel steadied the ladder. Emma supervised whether anyone requested supervision or not. Lucy offered emotional support. 10 minutes later the kite was safely recovered. Samuel held it aloft like a military victory. "I told you it could be done." "With assistance," Emma replied. "That still counts." "Only partially." Their bickering continued all the way back toward the house. Rosalind walked behind them, smiling despite herself. The sound of children's laughter felt different now. Less cautious. Less rare. Ravenshire Hall seemed to breathe easier whenever they laughed. Later that afternoon she discovered another change. It happened during tea. A footman entered carrying correspondence from London. Several letters belonged to Lady Agatha. One belonged to Rosalind. The seal identified the sender immediately. Her father. She opened the letter eagerly. The familiar handwriting brought an unexpected wave of homesickness. Lord Whitmore's news was reassuring. The estate's finances had stabilized somewhat. Harvest projections looked promising. Her younger cousins sent their affection. The letter ended with a simple sentence that lingered long after she finished reading. "We hope you are happy." Rosalind stared at the words. Happy? She was not certain how to answer that question. Her situation remained complicated. The Duke was still absent. The marriage had not occurred. The future remained uncertain. Yet when she looked up from the letter, she found Lucy asleep beside the window with Captain Flopsy tucked beneath one arm. Samuel was teaching Emma a card game while pretending not to care whether she enjoyed it. Emma was pretending not to enjoy it while very clearly enjoying it. The sight warned something deep inside her chest. Perhaps happiness was not always dramatic. Perhaps sometimes it arrived quietly. In small moments. Unexpected moments. Moments like these. "You are smiling." Lady Agatha's observation interrupted her thoughts. Rosalind glanced up. "Am I?" Quite noticeably. Her aunt folded her correspondence. "You care for them?" It was not a question. Rosalind looked back toward the children. "Yes." The answer came more easily than expected. Lady Agatha watched her for several seconds. "Be careful." Rosalind frowned slightly. "Why?" "Because affection becomes attachment." The words carried no criticism. Only concern. Rosalind understood immediately. Attachment invited vulnerability. Vulnerability invited pain. Especially when the future remained uncertain. Yet despite the warning, she could not bring herself to regret the growing bond. Not when Lucy reached for her hand without thinking. Not when Samuel sought her approval after every accomplishment. Not when Emma increasingly trusted her with thoughts she shared with no one else. That evening brought another small shift. After supper, the household gathered in the drawing room. Rain tapped softly against the windows once more. Emma sat reading. Samuel worked on a model ship. Lucy occupied the rug with Captain Flopsy. Rosalind embroidered near the fire. The arrangement felt surprisingly natural. Almost familial. A dangerous thought. She pushed it aside immediately. Then Lucy looked up from the floor. "Rosalind." "Yes?" "Can you tell a story?" Emma lowered her book. Samuel glanced up from the ship. 3 expectant faces turned toward her. Rosalind laughed softly. "That depends." "On what?" Lucy asked. "On whether I know any good stories." "You do." Samuel sounded completely certain despite possessing no evidence. "How do you know?" "You seem like somebody who does." Emma nodded reluctantly. "That is oddly logical." 20 minutes later, Rosalind found herself recounting a tale her mother had once told her. A story about a clever girl who outwitted a prideful nobleman through patience rather than force. The children listened with complete attention. Even Emma eventually abandoned her book. When the story ended, Lucy sighed happily. Samuel immediately demanded another. Emma attempted to appear indifferent and failed. The second story lasted longer. The third lasted longest of all. By the time the grandfather clock announced 10 o'clock, the room felt transformed. Warmer somehow. Softer. Alive. Mrs. Finch, Lucy's governess, eventually arrived to escort the children upstairs. Lucy hugged Rosalind before leaving. Samuel lingered awkwardly near the door. Then he nodded once and followed his sisters. Emma remained behind for a moment. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "The stories." Rosalind smiled. "You are welcome." Emma hesitated. The house used to sound like that. Like what? The girl glanced around the drawing room. Toward the fire. Toward the empty chairs. Toward the shadows gathering in distant corners. Happy. The word landed gently. Yet its impact lingered. Emma left moments later. Rosalind remained beside the fire long after everyone else retired. The flames cast dancing patterns across the walls. Outside, rain continued falling across the dark Yorkshire countryside. She thought about Emma's comment. The house used to sound like that. Happy. Perhaps that was what she had sensed since arriving. Not merely grief. Absence. Ravenshire Hall remembered what it had once been. The people living within it remembered too. And without realizing it, Rosalind had begun helping them remember again. The realization should have comforted her. Instead, it left her strangely emotional. Because the more she cared for the children, the more uncertain her future became. Then, just as she prepared to leave for the evening, a servant appeared in the doorway. His expression looked unusually bright. "My lady." Rosalind looked up. "Yes?" "A message has arrived from Yorkshire." Her pulse quickened immediately. "From His Grace." "Yes, my lady." The servant smiled. "The Duke is coming home." The news spread through Ravenshire Hall before sunrise. By breakfast, every servant seemed to move with slightly greater purpose. Fresh flowers appeared in rooms that had stood without them for weeks. Silver gleamed brighter. Fires burned warmer. Even the estate itself appeared transformed beneath a clear summer sky. After nearly 2 weeks of absence, the Duke of Ravenshire was finally returning home. Rosalind discovered quickly that anticipation carried many different forms. Lucy could barely remain seated for more than a minute. Samuel checked the front drive so often that Mrs. Finch threatened to assign additional arithmetic lessons. Emma pretended complete indifference while repeatedly glancing toward the windows whenever she thought nobody noticed. Rosalind noticed. She suspected everyone else did as well. The children missed their father deeply. That truth became impossible to ignore. Shortly before noon, the first distant sound of carriage wheels echoed across the estate. Lucy heard it first. "He is here." She jumped to her feet so quickly that Captain Flopsy tumbled onto the carpet. Samuel abandoned his book instantly. Emma rose more slowly, though excitement flashed briefly across her face. Then all 3 children rushed toward the entrance hall. Rosalind followed at a more dignified pace. Lady Agatha walked beside her. Nervous, her aunt asked quietly. Rosalind considered the question. "A little." "Only a little." "Perhaps more than a little." Lady Agatha smiled knowingly. "That seems reasonable." They reached the entrance hall moments later. Sunlight streamed through tall windows. Servants lined the walls. Mr. Pembroke stood near the doors with visible satisfaction. At the center of everything waited 3 children trying very hard not to appear impatient. The sound of approaching wheels grew louder. Then louder still. Finally the carriage stopped outside. Silence followed. Complete silence. Rosalind became unexpectedly aware of her heartbeat. This was the man whose name she had spoken for months. The man she had agreed to marry. The man whose absence had shaped every conversation since her arrival. The man she knew only through stories, documents, and 3 children who loved him fiercely. The front doors opened. Nathaniel Ashcroft stepped inside. For one suspended moment, nobody moved. He was taller than Rosalind expected. Well over 6 feet. Broad-shouldered. Imposing without effort. Dark hair touched with the faintest hint of silver near his temples. A face carved by responsibility rather than vanity. Grey eyes. The same grey eyes his children carried. He removed his gloves slowly, scanning the hall as though confirming everything remained where he had left it. There was nothing dramatic about him. No theatrical entrance. No arrogance. Yet the entire room seemed to shift around his presence. Power rarely needed to announce itself. It simply existed. Then Lucy launched herself across the hall. "Papa!" The transformation happened instantly. The distant Duke disappeared. The father remained. Nathaniel caught her effortlessly and lifted her into his arms. A genuine smile appeared. Warm. Unrestrained. Entirely different from the man who had entered seconds earlier. "There you are." Lucy wrapped her arms around his neck. "You were gone forever. 2 weeks. Forever. A slight exaggeration. Samuel reached them next. Nathaniel rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. How much trouble have you caused? Not much. That means a great deal. Samuel grinned. Emma approached last. For a moment neither moved. Then Nathaniel opened one arm. Emma stepped forward immediately. The brief embrace spoke volumes. Rosalind found herself looking away. Not because the moment felt private. Because it unexpectedly touched something deep inside her. Love did not always announce itself through grand declarations. Sometimes it existed in small gestures practiced over years. Nathaniel eventually released his children and looked toward Mr. Pembroke. They exchanged a few words. Instructions. Updates. Estate matters. Then his gaze moved farther across the hall. Directly toward Rosalind. Everything else seemed to fade slightly. Not disappear. Simply recede. This was the moment she had imagined repeatedly. Their first meeting. Nathaniel studied her quietly. No hostility. No enthusiasm. Merely careful observation. Rosalind suddenly understood why people found him intimidating. He noticed things. The sort of man who paid attention before speaking. The sort of man difficult to deceive. Mr. Pembroke stepped forward. Your Grace. May I present Lady Rosalind Whitmore? Nathaniel approached. Each step measured. Controlled. Rosalind curtsied appropriately. Your Grace. Lady Rosalind. His voice was deeper than she expected. Calm. Precise. You have my apologies. She blinked. For what? You arrived at Ravenshire Hall to find the intended groom absent. The faintest trace of dry humor touched his expression. That cannot have created a favorable first impression. Rosalind surprised herself by smiling. It was certainly memorable. Something flickered briefly in his eyes. Interest, perhaps. Or amusement. It vanished almost immediately. You have been treated well, I hope. Very well. Good. The exchange remained polite. Formal. Entirely appropriate. Yet Rosalind found herself studying him despite her best intentions. There was exhaustion beneath the composure. Not physical exhaustion. Something older. Something settled deep within him. The children clearly noticed none of this. Lucy tugged impatiently on his sleeve. Papa. Yes? We have important news. Nathaniel glanced downward. That sounds dangerous. Rosalind tells stories. Samuel immediately joined the conversation. Good stories. Emma nodded once. Very good stories. Nathaniel looked genuinely surprised. Then he glanced back toward Rosalind. My children are not generous critics. I have discovered that. A second flicker of amusement appeared. Slightly stronger this time. Before either could say more, Lucy made an executive decision. She grabbed Rosalind's hand with one small fist and Nathaniel's sleeve with the other. Come. Nathaniel looked down. Where? The drawing room. Why? Lucy stared at him as though the answer should be obvious. Because everyone is there. Neither adult had time to object. Within moments they found themselves escorted toward the drawing room by a 5-year-old determined to manage the entire household. Samuel and Emma followed. Lady Agatha wisely remained behind. The resulting gathering felt strangely natural. Children talked over one another. Lucy described every event from the previous week. Samuel corrected details whenever necessary. Emma occasionally contributed observations. Nathaniel listened with surprising patience. Rosalind found herself observing rather than participating. More than once she caught Nathaniel watching his children with unmistakable affection. More than once she noticed his attention shift toward her whenever one of them mentioned her name. Gradually a realization began forming. Nathaniel had expected something entirely different. She could see it in the questions he asked, the assumptions hidden beneath them. He had expected a stranger waiting impatiently for marriage arrangements. Perhaps an ambitious woman eager for title and position. Instead, he had returned to find his children thoroughly attached to her. The evidence surrounded him. Lucy sat beside Rosalind. Samuel constantly sought her reactions. Emma included her naturally in conversation. The situation clearly puzzled him. Several hours later, after luncheon and countless stories from the children, the household finally began settling into its normal rhythm. Rosalind escaped briefly into the eastern gardens. The fresh air felt welcome after a crowded morning. Roses climbed stone walls nearby. Bees drifted lazily between blooms. For the first time all day, she found herself alone. Or so she thought. Footsteps sounded behind her. She turned. Nathaniel stood several feet away. Not close enough to invade propriety. Close enough for conversation. I hope I am not interrupting. Not at all. Silence followed. Comfortable enough. Yet filled with unspoken things. Nathaniel glanced toward the gardens. Mr. Pembroke informs me that the children have monopolized much of your time. I did not mind. Most people would. Most people have not met Lucy. The response earned another faint smile. Then his expression grew more thoughtful. Emma writes very few letters. Rosalind waited. I received 3 during the past week. Surprise crossed her face. Nathaniel noticed. All mentioned you. She did not know what to say. Samuel informed me that you helped recover a kite. A collaborative effort. Lucy claims Captain Flopsy has improved his manners. Rosalind laughed softly before she could stop herself. For the first time, Nathaniel looked directly at her without reserve. The moment lasted only seconds. Yet something shifted. Very slightly. Almost imperceptibly. Thank you, he said quietly. The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. For what? For making this house feel less empty while I was gone. Rosalind forgot every prepared response. Because the words sounded honest. Entirely honest. Before she could answer, a familiar voice echoed from the terrace. Rosalind! Lucy came running across the lawn. Samuel followed. Emma walked behind them with considerably more dignity. Nathaniel stepped aside automatically as the children reached her. Then something remarkable happened. Lucy threw her arms around Rosalind's waist. Samuel immediately joined the conversation. Emma slipped naturally into place beside her. All 3 gravitated toward Rosalind without hesitation. Without thought. As though she already belonged among them. Nathaniel watched the scene unfold. Completely still. Rosalind looked up just in time to catch the expression on his face. Surprise. Genuine surprise. Not because the children cared for her. Because he had not realized how much. And for the first time since arriving at Ravenshire Hall, she saw something else in his grey eyes. Not caution. Not obligation. Curiosity. 3 days after Nathaniel's return, Ravenshire Hall began to feel different again. Not colder. Not warmer. More complicated. The change was subtle at first. Rosalind noticed it in the way servants exchanged glances when new correspondents arrived. In the number of visitors suddenly requesting audiences with the Duke. In the growing pile of invitations appearing on Nathaniel's desk each morning. Society had learned that the Duke of Ravenshire was home. Society had also learned that his future bride was already living at Ravenshire Hall. Curiosity travelled quickly through aristocratic England. Faster than reason. Faster than facts. On a bright Thursday afternoon, Rosalind sat with Emma in the library while Lucy coloured illustrations beside the window and Samuel attempted to construct a miniature bridge from wooden blocks. The room smelled of books, sunlight, and fresh tea. It should have been peaceful. Instead, Emma looked distracted. She had turned the same page 3 times without reading a single line. Rosalind finally closed her own book. Something is troubling you. Emma glanced up immediately. Was I that obvious? Quite. The girl sighed softly. Aunt Victoria is coming. Samuel's tower collapsed. What? Lucy stopped colouring. No. The reaction startled Rosalind. I assume Aunt Victoria is not a beloved visitor. Emma exchanged a look with Samuel. That depends. On what? Whether you are Aunt Victoria. The answer was remarkably dry for an 11-year-old. Rosalind hid a smile. I take it she and your father disagree occasionally. Samuel snorted. Every day. Even when she is not here, Emma added. Lucy looked genuinely distressed. She always changes things. Rosalind frowned slightly. Who is she? Emma closed her book. Papa's sister. That explained some of the emotion immediately. Family disagreements often ran deeper than social ones. She lives in London. Mostly. Emma hesitated. She believes she knows what is best for everyone. Samuel muttered something under his breath that was probably not appropriate for polite company. Emma ignored him. She never liked Mama. The room grew quieter. Rosalind had learned to recognize those moments. Moments when a conversation unexpectedly brushed against old wounds. Lucy lowered her eyes. Samuel suddenly found his bridge fascinating. Emma looked toward the window. Why not? Rosalind asked gently. Emma shrugged. Nobody really knows. Before anyone could continue, the sound of carriage wheels echoed outside. Samuel groaned dramatically. Lucy slumped in her chair. Emma closed her eyes briefly. That was fast. Rosalind glanced toward the front drive. A polished black carriage had already stopped before the entrance steps. Several servants hurried forward. Moments later, the front doors opened. The woman who entered Ravenshire Hall possessed the kind of elegance that demanded attention. She appeared to be in her early 40s. Tall. Beautiful. Impeccably dressed. Her dark hair was arranged with precision. Her posture suggested a lifetime spent being obeyed. Lady Victoria Ashcroft did not merely enter a room. She took possession of it. Rosalind understood immediately why the children looked apprehensive. Victoria's sharp eyes swept across the entrance hall, assessing everything in seconds. Nothing escaped her notice. Not the flowers. Not the servants. Not the children waiting reluctantly near the staircase. And certainly not Rosalind. The older woman's gaze settled on her. Interest appeared instantly. Then calculation. So. Victoria removed her gloves one finger at a time. You must be Lady Rosalind Whitmore. Rosalind curtsied politely. Lady Victoria. Victoria smiled. It was technically a smile. Warmth never reached her eyes. At last. I have heard so much about you. Something about the phrase felt dangerous. Rosalind could not explain why. I hope nothing too alarming. Victoria's smile widened slightly. That depends whom one asks. The exchange remained perfectly civil. Yet tension moved beneath every word. Nathaniel arrived moments later. Unlike his sister, he showed little surprise. As though he had expected her visit the moment he returned home. Victoria. Nathaniel. The siblings exchanged a brief embrace. Formal. Controlled. Polite. Rosalind immediately noticed what was missing. Ease. There was affection between them. Certainly. Yet there was also history. Complicated history. The sort families carried for years. Victoria spent the remainder of the afternoon observing. Rosalind realized this gradually. She watched conversations. She watched the children. Most importantly, she watched Rosalind. During tea, she asked careful questions. During supper, she listened more than she spoke. By evening, Rosalind felt like a specimen being studied beneath glass. The following morning proved even worse. Breakfast should have been pleasant. Instead, Victoria chose a seat directly beside Nathaniel and immediately began discussing marriage arrangements. The wedding should occur before autumn. Nathaniel buttered a piece of toast. Perhaps. Not perhaps. Certainly. Victoria turned toward Rosalind. Society already expects it. Rosalind smiled politely. I imagine society survives occasional disappointment. Victoria laughed softly. How refreshing. The compliment felt strangely like criticism. Emma noticed it too. Rosalind saw the girl stiffen slightly. Nathaniel remained focused on his breakfast. The conversation shifted. Yet the uncomfortable feeling lingered. By the third day of Victoria's visit, the conflict finally emerged openly. It happened in the gardens. Rosalind sat beneath the same oak tree where she had once helped rescue Samuel's kite. Lucy played nearby. Emma read quietly. Samuel worked on another engineering project destined to collapse dramatically. The afternoon was peaceful until Victoria appeared. There you are. Rosalind looked up. Lady Victoria. May I join you? The question sounded polite. It did not feel optional. Rosalind gestured toward an empty chair. Victoria settled gracefully into place. For several minutes she spoke about harmless topics. Weather. London. Charity events. Then her attention shifted toward the children. Lucy sat beside Rosalind, leaning comfortably against her arm. Samuel constantly sought her reactions whenever he completed a new section of his bridge. Emma no longer seemed hesitant around her at all. Victoria noticed everything. You have become very popular. Rosalind smiled faintly. They have been kind to me. Kind? Victoria's gaze remained fixed on the children. That is one interpretation. The remark carried enough edge to make Rosalind cautious. I am not certain I understand. Victoria folded her hands neatly in her lap. Children become attached easily. Sometimes. Especially when they are vulnerable. Rosalind's smile faded. The conversation had finally arrived where Victoria intended it to go. I care for them greatly. I do not doubt it. Victoria's voice remained pleasant. The question is whether that affection is entirely innocent. The words landed like cold water. For a moment Rosalind simply stared at her. Surely she had misunderstood. Yet Victoria's expression confirmed otherwise. I beg your pardon. You arrived here as a future duchess. Victoria tilted her head slightly. You then became indispensable to 3 lonely children remarkably quickly. Emma lowered her book. Samuel stopped working. Even Lucy looked confused. Rosalind felt disbelief giving way to hurt. Are you suggesting I manipulated them? Victoria's silence answered clearly enough. Emma rose instantly. That is not true. The sharpness in her voice startled everyone. Including Victoria. Emma. It is not true. The girl stepped closer to Rosalind. Nobody made us like her. Victoria's expression hardened slightly. Children do not always recognize influence when they see it. Samuel stood next. You are wrong. Samuel. You are. The boy's face reddened. Rosalind never asked us for anything. Lucy abandoned all pretense entirely. She climbed directly into Rosalind's lap and wrapped both arms around her waist. She is nice. Victoria looked momentarily taken aback by the united front. Then she recovered quickly. I am merely being cautious. Rosalind kept her voice steady despite the sting of humiliation. Your concern for your family is admirable. Your accusation is not. For several seconds neither woman spoke. The air felt heavy. Uncomfortable. Then a familiar voice interrupted from behind them. What accusation? Nathaniel stood several yards away. No one had heard him approach. His expression revealed nothing. Yet something in his posture made the entire garden fall silent. Victoria looked away first. Rosalind's heart skipped unexpectedly. because for the first time since arriving at Ravenshire Hall, she genuinely did not know whose side the Duke would choose. For one long moment, nobody answered. The summer breeze stirred the leaves overhead. Somewhere beyond the gardens, a distant horse whinnied near the stables. Yet within the small circle beneath the oak tree, everything seemed suspended. Nathaniel's gaze moved from his sister to Rosalind. Then to the children. He missed very little. Rosalind knew that now. Victoria recovered first. Nothing of consequence. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. Emma appears ready to challenge Parliament. Samuel looks prepared to defend a fortress. Lucy appears offended on behalf of civilization itself. Lucy tightened her grip around Rosalind's waist. I am. Nathaniel's expression remained unreadable. Then perhaps it is of consequence. Victoria rose smoothly from her chair. I merely expressed concern regarding how quickly attachments have formed. Silence followed. Emma looked furious. Samuel looked equally displeased. Rosalind wished desperately that the ground might open and spare everyone further embarrassment. Nathaniel glanced toward his children. And? Victoria frowned. And? What exactly concerns you? For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Victoria's face. She had clearly expected support. Perhaps immediate support. Instead, Nathaniel waited calmly. The situation is unusual. How? Victoria gestured toward Rosalind. The children have become remarkably dependent upon Lady Rosalind's presence. Nathaniel looked toward Lucy. Do you enjoy spending time with Lady Rosalind? Yes. Why? Lucy considered carefully. Because she listens. Nathaniel nodded once. Then he looked toward Samuel. And you? She treats me like I have a brain. An admirable quality. A hint of amusement touched Nathaniel's voice. Finally he turned toward Emma. Emma. The oldest child lifted her chin. She never asks us to forget, Mama. The answer changed everything. Rosalind felt it immediately. So did Victoria. So did Nathaniel. Silence settled again. Different this time. Heavier. More meaningful. Nathaniel's gaze remained on Emma for several seconds. Something unreadable moved through his expression. Then he looked back toward his sister. I see no problem. Victoria stared at him. Nathaniel. Victoria. His voice remained calm. My children are capable of choosing whom they trust. The words were simple. Yet their impact was unmistakable. Rosalind felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost embarrassed her. Not because Nathaniel had defended her publicly. Although he had. Not because Victoria had been contradicted. But because he had trusted his children. Victoria pressed her lips together. You are allowing sentiment to cloud judgment. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed slightly. And you are allowing suspicion to create problems where none exist. The conversation ended there. At least outwardly. Victoria excused herself soon afterward. The children remained close to Rosalind. None of them appeared eager to discuss what had happened. Neither was she. Yet the incident lingered. That evening, after the children retired and Lady Agatha withdrew to her rooms, Rosalind found herself wandering through the quieter sections of the house. She needed distance. Time to think. The confrontation had unsettled her more than she wished to admit. Not because Victoria's accusation was true. It was not. But because it exposed something Rosalind had tried hard not to examine. She was becoming attached. Deeply attached. An attachment always carried risk. Her footsteps eventually led her toward the family chapel. The small stone building stood connected to the eastern wing through a covered passageway. She had passed it before without entering. Tonight, however, she found herself pausing before the carved oak door. Emma's words echoed through her thoughts. Mama wrote a letter before she died. I saw it once. The chapel. Rosalind pushed the door open. Cool air greeted her immediately. The chapel was beautiful in a quiet, intimate way. Colored glass windows filtered moonlight across polished stone floors. Wooden pews stood in orderly rows. Fresh flowers rested near the altar. Someone clearly maintained the space carefully. Rosalind moved slowly through the room. Her footsteps echoed softly. She was not searching for anything specific. At least that was what she told herself. Yet her attention drifted repeatedly toward corners. Shelves. Cabinets. Any place where a forgotten object might remain hidden. The letter. Always the letter. The mystery had grown larger with every conversation. Why had it disappeared? Why had Nathaniel searched for it? Why did Emma remember it so clearly? And why had the former Duchess included a letter within her portrait? None of it felt accidental. A faint creaking sound interrupted her thoughts. Rosalind turned quickly. Someone stood near the doorway. Her pulse jumped, then relaxed immediately. Emma. The girl looked slightly guilty. I could ask what you were doing here. Rosalind smiled faintly. Fair. Emma stepped farther into the chapel. I could not sleep. Neither could I. The girl glanced around. You were thinking about the letter. It was not a question. Rosalind laughed softly. Am I truly that transparent? Only sometimes. Emma approached one of the front pews and sat down. Rosalind joined her. For several moments neither spoke. The chapel felt peaceful at night. Almost separate from the rest of the world. Do you ever come here often? Rosalind asked. Emma nodded. Mama used to bring us. Her expression softened. Especially when things felt difficult. Why? Emma thought for a moment. She said quiet places help people hear themselves think. Rosalind smiled. Your mother was very wise. Yes. The answer came immediately. Then Emma's gaze shifted toward the altar. She used to keep things here. Rosalind looked up. Things? Letters. Notes. Lists. Her heart quickened. Here? Emma pointed toward a narrow cabinet built into the wall beside the altar. There. Rosalind followed her gaze. The cabinet appeared ordinary. Small. Unremarkable. Exactly the sort of place no one would notice. Did anyone search it? Emma shrugged. Probably. Yet neither moved immediately. Eventually curiosity won. Together they crossed the chapel. Rosalind opened the cabinet carefully. Shelves lined the interior. Most were empty. A few held prayer books. One contained old church records. Nothing remarkable. At first. Then Emma leaned closer. Wait. She reached toward the back corner of the lowest shelf. Her fingers brushed something hidden behind a stack of ledgers. A folded piece of paper. Yellowed with age. Rosalind's breath caught. Emma carefully pulled it free. Not a letter. A single page. Torn from something larger. Both stared at it. The paper contained handwriting. Elegant feminine handwriting. The ink had faded but remained legible. Emma's eyes widened immediately. That is Mama's writing. Rosalind looked closer. The page appeared incomplete. Part of a journal perhaps. Or notes. Only a few lines remained visible. Yet those lines were enough to send a chill through her. If anything should happen to me, Nathaniel must know the truth. Below that, the paper had been torn away. The remaining text ended abruptly. No explanation. No names. No truth. Only those haunting words. Emma stared at the fragment in stunned silence. Rosalind felt her pulse hammering. Because this was no ordinary note. No household reminder. No shopping list. Someone had written those words intentionally. Someone had hidden them. Someone had never meant for them to disappear. A floorboard creaked behind them. Both turned instantly. Nathaniel stood in the chapel doorway. Moonlight framed his tall figure. His gaze moved from Rosalind to Emma, then to the paper in Emma's trembling hand. The color drained from his face. And for the first time since Rosalind had met him, the Duke of Ravenshire looked genuinely shaken. Nathaniel did not move for several seconds. Neither did Rosalind. Neither did Emma. The chapel seemed frozen beneath the pale glow of moonlight streaming through stained glass windows. The small fragment of paper remained in Emma's trembling hand. A single torn page. A few unfinished lines. Yet the effect it had upon the Duke of Ravenshire was unmistakable. Rosalind had never seen him look like that. Not surprised. Not merely unsettled. Wounded. As though a ghost had stepped from the past and spoken his name. Emma found her voice first. "Papa." Nathaniel blinked. Slowly. Then his attention shifted to his daughter. "Where did you find that?" His tone remained controlled. Only someone listening carefully would notice the strain beneath it. Emma held up the paper. "In the cabinet." Nathaniel crossed the chapel in measured steps. Rosalind watched him closely. He took the fragment gently, almost reverently. For a long moment he simply stared at the familiar handwriting. The silence stretched. Emma looked anxious. Rosalind felt no less unsettled herself. Finally Nathaniel spoke. "This is her writing." Emma swallowed. "I told you." The Duke nodded faintly. His gaze never left the page. "You did." He sounded distant. Lost somewhere far beyond the chapel walls. Rosalind waited. Eventually Nathaniel folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his coat pocket. "It is late." The words felt abrupt. "We should return to the house." Emma looked disappointed. "That is all." Nathaniel's expression softened slightly. "No." He looked at his daughter. "But it is all for tonight." Emma clearly wanted to argue. Then she noticed something in her father's face and stopped. Rosalind noticed it too. Whatever memories the fragment had awakened, they were not easy ones. The walk back to Ravenshire Hall passed in near silence. Emma retired immediately afterward. Nathaniel wished her good night and watched until she disappeared upstairs. Then he remained standing in the entrance hall. Alone. Rosalind hesitated. Every instinct suggested she should leave him to his thoughts. Yet another part of her understood loneliness when she saw it. "Your Grace." Nathaniel looked up. "Nathaniel." The correction came quietly. Rosalind blinked. "I beg your pardon. We are past formalities, I think." Something about the statement warmed her unexpectedly. "Very well." He glanced toward the staircase where Emma had vanished moments earlier. She should not have found that fragment. Yet she did. "Yes." Nathaniel exhaled slowly. "And perhaps that matters." Rosalind studied him carefully. "You recognized the handwriting immediately." A faint smile touched his lips. Sad rather than happy. "I would recognize it anywhere." Neither spoke for several moments. Then Nathaniel surprised her. "Would you walk with me?" The request was unexpected. So was her immediate answer. "Of course." They crossed into the western gallery. Most of the household had retired. Only a few lamps remained lit. Their footsteps echoed softly against polished floors. Her name was Eleanor. Nathaniel's voice broke the silence. Rosalind realized immediately he was speaking of his wife. "Emma resembles her." "Very much." His expression softened. "Especially when she is determined." Rosalind smiled faintly. "That happens often." "I know." A flicker of amusement appeared. Then disappeared. Eleanor kept journals. Nathaniel's gaze drifted toward a distant window. Letters. Notes. Lists. Thoughts. She wrote constantly. Rosalind thought of the fragment. "If anything should happen to me, Nathaniel must know the truth." The words echoed through her mind. Did she ever mention a truth she wished you to know? Nathaniel stopped walking. For a moment he simply stared into the darkness beyond the glass. No. The answer came too quickly. Too carefully. Rosalind noticed. So did he. Or perhaps I never understood what she meant. Honesty sounded difficult for him. Yet he offered it anyway. That mattered. You searched for the letter. Nathaniel looked at her. Not surprised. Almost resigned. Emma told you. She worried about it. So did I. His voice grew quieter. For a long time. They resumed walking. Rosalind sensed that every word cost him something. Grief never truly disappeared. It simply changed shape. What happened to it? She asked gently. Nathaniel shook his head. I do not know. Someone must. His jaw tightened. Perhaps. The response lingered. Because for the first time, Rosalind wondered whether the missing letter had truly vanished by accident. The thought followed her into the next day. It followed her through breakfast. Through the children's lessons. Through an afternoon spent organizing books in the library. The fragment changed everything. Before, the mystery surrounding Eleanor Ashcroft felt emotional. Now it felt intentional. Something had been hidden. Something important enough to be concealed for years. Someone knew more than they admitted. By evening, events took an unexpected turn. Rosalind entered the blue drawing room intending to retrieve a book. Instead, she stopped abruptly just inside the doorway. Voices carried from the adjoining conservatory. Nathaniel's voice. Victoria's voice. The siblings were arguing. Not loudly. Yet intensely enough that neither realized someone stood nearby. Rosalind should have left immediately. She knew that. Yet one sentence rooted her in place. You should have destroyed all of it. Victoria sounded frustrated. Nathaniel went very still. Rosalind felt her pulse quicken. Destroyed all of what? We have had this conversation before. Nathaniel's voice remained calm. Dangerous calm. And we will continue having it until you listen. Victoria's footsteps crossed the conservatory. The past serves no purpose now. Rosalind could hear every word. Every syllable. The past contains my wife. Nathaniel's response cut through the room like steel. Silence followed. Then Victoria sighed. Nathaniel. No. His voice lowered. Do not ask me to forget her. Rosalind stepped backward instinctively. She had heard enough. More than enough. Yet one thought refused to leave her mind. Destroy all of it. The phrase felt wrong. Deeply wrong. That night's sleep proved impossible. Questions multiplied. Why would Victoria want Eleanor's journals destroyed? Why had she disliked her sister-in-law? Why did everyone become uncomfortable whenever the past surfaced? Near midnight, Rosalind gave up entirely and wandered toward the library. The room stood empty. Moonlight spilled across rows of books. She moved aimlessly among the shelves. Thinking. Searching for answers that refused to come. Then she noticed something unusual. A book lay open on one of the reading tables. Not unusual by itself. Yet this particular volume had not been there earlier. Curious, she stepped closer. It was not truly a book at all. More of a ledger. An old estate record. Someone had been examining it recently. Several pages contained markers. Notes. References. Rosalind frowned. Then her eyes widened. The entries were dated from 3 years earlier. The year Eleanor died. She looked closer. Household expenditures. Visitor logs. Staff assignments. Ordinary records. Mostly. Then one name appeared repeatedly. Lady Victoria Ashcroft. Rosalind turned another page. The name appeared again. And again. Week after week. Month after month. Far more often than expected. Victoria had practically lived at Ravenshire Hall during Eleanor's final months. Why? Footsteps sounded suddenly outside the library. Rosalind closed the ledger instinctively. Her heart hammered. The door opened. A maid entered carrying fresh candles. She smiled politely upon seeing Rosalind. "My lady." Rosalind forced a smile in return. Yet her thoughts remained fixed on the ledger. On Victoria's repeated visits. On the hidden fragment. On the missing letter. Because for the first time, a troubling possibility began forming. What if the person who knew the most about Eleanor's final months was not Nathaniel? What if it was Victoria? And what if someone had spent 3 years making certain the truth remained buried? By the end of the week, Ravenshire Hall received an invitation that none of its occupants could reasonably decline. The Duchess of Wexford was hosting one of the largest summer gatherings in Yorkshire. Landowners, politicians, noble families, and influential members of society would attend. Declining such an event would generate more discussion than attending it. Accepting, however, created a different challenge entirely. "You are going." Lady Agatha delivered the verdict over breakfast with complete certainty. Nathaniel looked up from a stack of correspondence. "Am I?" "Yes." "How unfortunate." "You require visibility. I require peace. That has never stopped society." Rosalind hid a smile behind her teacup. Nathaniel noticed. His grey eyes met hers briefly. The corner of his mouth twitched. It was not quite a smile. It was close enough. Across the table, Victoria observed the exchange with obvious displeasure. The older woman had become increasingly distant over the past several days. Polite. Flawlessly courteous. Yet distant. Rosalind sensed constant evaluation behind every interaction. It was exhausting. Emma noticed it too. So did Samuel. Even Lucy occasionally frowned whenever Victoria entered a room. The children had grown protective in ways that both touched and worried Rosalind. The evening of the gathering arrived beneath a sky painted gold and lavender by the setting sun. Ravenshire Hall buzzed with activity. Servants moved through corridors carrying garment boxes and polished shoes. Carriages were prepared. Jewelry selected. Final details arranged. Rosalind stood before the mirror in her bedchamber while her maid adjusted the last ribbon of her gown. The dress was elegant but understated. Deep blue silk. Modest lace. Nothing designed to attract excessive attention. Rosalind preferred it that way. "You look beautiful, my lady." Rosalind smiled faintly. "You are very kind. I am very honest." The maid stepped back. "His Grace will be impressed." Rosalind immediately looked away from the mirror. The comment unsettled her more than it should have. Because lately she had begun noticing things she should probably ignore. The way Nathaniel listened when she spoke. The way his expression softened around the children. The way silence between them no longer felt uncomfortable. Dangerous observations. Especially given the uncertainty surrounding everything else. An hour later, the Ravenshire carriage rolled toward Wexford Manor beneath the glow of hundreds of lanterns. The estate appeared magnificent. Music drifted through open windows. Carriages lined the drive for nearly a quarter mile. Guests filled the grand entrance. Aristocratic society had arrived in full force. Nathaniel offered Rosalind his arm as they entered. The gesture was entirely proper. Entirely expected. Yet awareness moved through her the moment her gloved hand rested lightly against his sleeve. She disliked noticing such things. Unfortunately, she noticed them anyway. The ballroom glittered beneath crystal chandeliers. Silk gowns flowed across polished floors. Gentlemen clustered near card tables and refreshments. Conversations overlapped in a constant hum of gossip and speculation. Rosalind felt dozens of eyes turn toward them almost immediately. Not surprising. The Duke of Ravenshire always attracted attention. His future bride attracted even more. Nathaniel seemed unaffected by it all. Years of experience had clearly taught him how to ignore society's curiosity. Rosalind was less practiced. Relax. His voice reached her quietly. You look as though you expect an execution. She laughed despite herself. That is not encouraging. Neither is your expression. Everyone is staring. They stare at everyone. That is clearly untrue. A flicker of amusement appeared in his eyes. Fair enough. For a little while, the evening proceeded smoothly. They greeted acquaintances, exchanged polite conversation, endured endless speculation disguised as compliments. Rosalind began believing the event might actually prove tolerable. Then Victoria intervened. It happened gradually, cleverly. The most dangerous attacks often did. During supper, Victoria positioned herself among a group of influential women. Several ladies immediately gathered around her. The conversation appeared harmless from a distance. It was not. Rosalind realized this only after noticing how often certain glances drifted her direction. Curious glances. Doubtful glances. Assessing glances. Something was wrong. 20 minutes later, she discovered exactly what. My dear. Lady Ashbourne approached with a smile too bright to be sincere. You have accomplished something remarkable. Rosalind frowned politely. Have I? Winning the affection of the Ravenshire children so quickly. Several nearby women exchanged knowing looks. Rosalind felt a small knot form in her stomach. They are wonderful children. Of course. Lady Ashbourne sipped her champagne. Still, such rapid attachment is unusual. There it was. The implication. Subtle. Poisonous. Deliberate. Rosalind immediately understood. Victoria had not openly accused her again. She had done something worse. She had planted doubt. Society excelled at nurturing doubt into certainty. Children respond to kindness, Rosalind replied calmly. Naturally. Lady Ashbourne smiled. And future duchesses often benefit from being indispensable. The remark landed precisely as intended. Several women looked away. Others pretended not to hear. The humiliation spread quietly. Efficiently. Like ink across paper. Rosalind forced herself to remain composed. She would not create a scene. She would not give gossip additional material. Yet hurt moved through her despite every effort otherwise. Because the accusation struck at something precious. Her relationship with the children was genuine. It always had been. Reducing that bond to manipulation felt ugly. Cruel. Lady Rosalind. Another voice joined the conversation. Lady Penhurst. Older. Sharper. Surely you understand why some people find the situation concerning. Rosalind looked directly at her. No. I do not. Silence followed. The surrounding group grew noticeably attentive. 3 grieving children. Lady Penhurst tilted her head. A future duchess seeking acceptance. Stop. The word escaped before Rosalind could restrain it. The women blinked. She rarely spoke sharply. You may question me if you wish. Do not question the children's sincerity. Her voice remained steady. Yet emotion threatened beneath the surface. They deserve better than that. For one brief moment, nobody responded. Then Lady Ashbourne laughed softly. How passionate. The dismissal hurt more than the accusation. Because suddenly Rosalind understood. Nothing she said would matter. Their conclusions already existed. Facts were irrelevant. Victoria's poison had done its work. She felt exposed. Isolated. Publicly judged by people who knew nothing about the truth. Nothing about Emma's courage. Samuel's loyalty. Lucy's endless affection. Nothing about the lonely house that slowly learned how to laugh again. Lady Rosalind. The familiar voice interrupted everything. Nathaniel. He stood several feet away. His expression revealed nothing. Yet something in the ballroom shifted immediately. Conversations quieted. Attention redirected. Power carried its own gravity. Your Grace. Lady Ashbourne curtsied quickly. Nathaniel's gaze moved across the group. Not hurried. Not careless. Careful. Observant. He missed very little. Am I interrupting? No one answered immediately. Lady Penhurst recovered first. Merely conversation. Nathaniel looked toward Rosalind. One glance. One brief glance. Somehow he understood. Not every detail. Enough. The knot in her chest tightened unexpectedly. Because she realized how desperately she wanted him to understand. How desperately she wanted someone to. Nathaniel remained silent for several seconds. Then he addressed the group. How fortunate. Confusion flickered across several faces. I beg your pardon. Lady Ashbourne asked. Nathaniel's voice remained calm. Conversation generally requires accuracy. The ballroom seemed quieter now. Much quieter. Rosalind's pulse quickened. Victoria stood near the far side of the room. Watching. Waiting. Nathaniel's gaze never left the women before him. Lady Rosalind has shown extraordinary kindness to my children. His words carried clearly. Deliberately. If they care for her, that reflects their judgment. Not her manipulation. Complete silence followed. No one moved. No one spoke. Yet Nathaniel was not finished. Anyone suggesting otherwise insults my children. The words landed with unmistakable force. Several women looked away immediately. Lady Ashbourne flushed visibly. Lady Penhurst suddenly found the floor fascinating. Across the ballroom, Victoria went completely still. Rosalind could barely breathe. Because this was not private support. Not quiet reassurance. This was public. Unambiguous. Visible to everyone. Nathaniel turned toward her then. The noise of the ballroom seemed distant. Irrelevant. Lady Rosalind. His voice softened slightly. Would you honor me with the next dance? For one suspended moment, nobody spoke. Then Rosalind placed her hand in his. Yes. Around them, the entire ballroom watched. And somewhere across the room, Victoria's carefully constructed narrative began to crack. The journey home from Wexford Manor passed beneath a sky crowded with stars. Inside the carriage, silence settled naturally between Rosalind and Nathaniel. Not uncomfortable silence. Not awkward silence. Something quieter. More thoughtful. The events of the evening lingered between them. The humiliation. The accusations. The moment Nathaniel had stepped forward and ended the whispers before they could spread further. Rosalind stared out the window at the dark Yorkshire countryside rushing past. She still could not quite believe what had happened. Public support carried weight in aristocratic society. Support from a duke carried even more. Support from Nathaniel Ashcroft carried consequences. The gossip would not vanish overnight. Society never worked that way. Yet tonight had changed the balance. You are very quiet. Nathaniel's voice interrupted her thoughts. Rosalind glanced toward him. I could say the same. A faint smile appeared. Fair. For a moment neither spoke. Then Rosalind looked down at her folded hands. Thank you. Nathaniel's expression softened immediately. You should not have been placed in that position. Still. She met his gaze. Thank you. He held her eyes for several seconds before looking away. Some things deserve to be defended. The simple statement settled deep inside her chest. Neither said anything further. Yet the silence afterward felt different. Warmer somehow. When they arrived at Ravenshire Hall, most of the household had already retired. Only a few lamps remained lit. The children, however, had clearly ignored all reasonable bedtime instructions. Lucy appeared at the top of the staircase the moment the front door opened. You are home. Samuel emerged seconds later. Emma followed with considerably more dignity, though relief shone plainly in her eyes. Rosalind laughed softly. Should you not be asleep? Probably, Emma admitted. Definitely, Samuel added. Mrs. Finch said so, Lucy confirmed. Nathaniel looked heavenward. And naturally everyone obeyed. 3 guilty expressions answered him. The Duke failed completely at hiding his amusement. The next morning brought unexpected developments. Rosalind entered the breakfast room to discover Nathaniel already seated with several documents spread before him. His coffee sat untouched. A rare occurrence. He usually finished the first cup before speaking to anyone. Good morning. Nathaniel looked up. Good morning. Something in his expression immediately caught her attention. Focus. Intensity. Determination. Is something wrong? Instead of answering directly, he slid a folded sheet of paper across the table. Read this. Rosalind hesitated. Then she accepted the document. The handwriting belonged to Nathaniel. Several names had been listed. Dates. Locations. References to estate records. Visitor logs. Correspondence. She looked up in confusion. I do not understand. After the chapel, Nathaniel folded his hands together. I began reviewing records. Her pulse quickened. Concerning Eleanor. He nodded. And the missing letter. Every trace of sleepiness vanished. What did you find? Nathaniel leaned back slowly. Patterns. What sort of patterns? For a moment he seemed reluctant to answer. Then he spoke. Victoria was here far more often than I remembered. Rosalind remained very still. The same realization she had reached in the library. How often? Nearly every week during Eleanor's final year. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Sometimes more. You did not realize. I was managing 3 estates at the time. His voice carried unmistakable regret. There were periods when I traveled constantly. Rosalind understood. Responsibilities had a way of consuming attention. Especially for someone carrying as much as Nathaniel had. What else? He hesitated. Then slid another paper toward her. This arrived early this morning. Rosalind unfolded the document carefully. Her eyes widened almost immediately. It was a letter. Old. Very old. The edges had yellowed with age. The seal had been broken years earlier. Where did this come from? Mr. Pembroke. Nathaniel looked toward the window. One of the former housemaids recently passed away. Rosalind frowned slightly. I am sorry to hear that. Before her death, she instructed her family to deliver certain papers to Ravenshire Hall. Nathaniel paused. Among them was that letter. Rosalind's hands trembled slightly as she looked down again. The handwriting was unmistakably feminine. Elegant. Familiar. Eleanor's. Dear Margaret, I fear I am becoming a stranger in my own home. Rosalind's breath caught. She continued reading. Victoria insists she only wishes to help. Perhaps she does. Yet lately I feel watched. Judged. Corrected. Everything I do seems somehow wrong. The letter ended there. Incomplete. The remaining pages were missing. Rosalind looked up slowly. Nathaniel's face had become unreadable. There were no additional pages. None. Silence filled the room. Heavy silence. Difficult silence. Because suddenly the fragments began fitting together. The missing letter. The journals. Victoria's hostility. Eleanor's growing unease. None of it proved wrongdoing. Yet none of it felt innocent either. Nathaniel. His gaze met hers immediately. Yes? Have you asked Victoria directly? A bitter smile appeared. Several times. And? She insists Eleanor was overly sensitive. Rosalind's stomach tightened. The explanation felt dismissive. Convenient. Unfair. Nathaniel seemed to reach the same conclusion. That answer satisfied me once. His voice grew quieter. It does not satisfy me now. Later that afternoon, events accelerated unexpectedly. Emma came racing into the library carrying a small wooden box. Her cheeks were flushed. Her eyes wide with excitement. "Papa." Nathaniel looked up immediately. "Emma. Look." She placed the box on the desk. Everyone gathered around. Rosalind leaned closer. The box appeared old. Worn. Dust coated the edges. "Where did you find it?" Nathaniel asked. "Behind the portrait." Emma's answer stunned everyone. "What portrait?" "Mama's." Silence exploded through the room. Rosalind felt her pulse jump. Nathaniel went completely still. "Explain." Emma drew a quick breath. "The covered portrait." Her voice rushed forward now. "I went back to the gallery this morning. One corner of the frame was loose." Nathaniel stared at the box. "And this was hidden there." Emma nodded. Carefully, he opened it. Inside rested several folded pages tied together with faded ribbon. For a moment nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Nathaniel lifted the bundle with remarkable care. Then he unfolded the first page. Rosalind watched the color leave his face. Emma gripped her father's sleeve. Samuel abandoned all pretense of indifference. Even Lucy sensed the importance of the moment. Nathaniel read silently for nearly a minute. Then another. Then another. Finally he closed his eyes. "Papa." Emma whispered. Nathaniel looked at his children. The emotion in his expression startled Rosalind. Grief. Relief. Heartbreak. Understanding. All at once. "What is it?" Samuel asked quietly. Nathaniel swallowed. Hard. Then he looked toward Rosalind. It was never a goodbye letter. The room fell silent. "What do you mean?" Rosalind asked. Nathaniel lowered his gaze to the pages. The missing letter. His voice shook for the first time since she had known him. Eleanor was not writing a farewell. He lifted one page carefully. She was trying to tell me the truth. Rosalind's heart hammered. About what? Nathaniel's eyes filled with a sadness so profound it seemed to age him instantly. About everything. Then he turned to the final page. And for the first time in 3 years, the complete truth about Eleanor Ashcroft began to reveal itself. The letter changed everything. Nathaniel spent nearly an hour reading through the pages while the rest of the room remained silent. No one interrupted him. No one dared. Emma sat beside her father. Samuel stood near the window with his arms folded tightly across his chest. Lucy held Captain Flopsy and watched everyone with solemn concern. Rosalind remained still, her heart pounding harder with every passing minute. When Nathaniel finally lowered the final page, the room felt different. As though a door that had remained locked for years had suddenly opened. "Papa." Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. Nathaniel looked at his children. His eyes glistened. Not with weakness. With grief finally meeting truth. "Your mother was trying to protect all of us." Silence followed. Emma swallowed hard. "From what?" Nathaniel glanced toward the pages. "From misunderstanding." He drew a slow breath. "From mistakes that became larger because no one spoke honestly." Rosalind listened carefully. Eleanor's words painted a very different picture than the one everyone had lived with for 3 years. There had been no scandal. No dark secret. No dramatic betrayal. Instead there had been something almost worse. Years of tension. Criticism disguised as concern. Pressure disguised as guidance. Victoria had inserted herself into every aspect of Eleanor's life. Every decision. Every responsibility. Every insecurity. Eleanor had written repeatedly about feeling inadequate. Judged. Constantly compared to impossible expectations. She never accused Victoria of cruelty. Yet the pain between the lines was undeniable. She felt alone. Nathaniel's voice cracked slightly. And I did not see it. Rosalind's heart ached for him. Because guilt had become his companion long before she arrived. Now he was discovering that much of it rested on an incomplete story. Emma reached for his hand. Nathaniel immediately squeezed hers. None of this was your fault, Papa. The 11-year-old spoke with remarkable certainty. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. I should have listened more carefully. Maybe. Emma's voice softened. But Mama loved you. The simple truth settled over the room. Nathaniel smiled sadly. Yes. He looked down at the final page once more. Then he stood. I need to speak with Victoria. No one attempted to stop him. An hour later, Victoria arrived in the blue drawing room at her brother's request. Rosalind had intended to leave. Instead, Nathaniel asked her to remain. The children remained as well. Victoria entered confidently. That confidence lasted approximately 3 seconds. Then she saw the letters spread across the table. The color drained from her face. Where did you find those? Nathaniel's expression remained calm. Too calm. Behind Eleanor's portrait. Victoria said nothing. You knew they existed. Still silence. Nathaniel picked up one of the pages. You told me she had become irrational. Victoria looked away. She was struggling. She was unhappy. His voice sharpened. There is a difference. The room grew painfully quiet. Victoria's composure began to crack. I was trying to help. Were you? Nathaniel asked quietly. Or were you trying to control everything? The words landed heavily. Victoria closed her eyes. You do not understand. Then explain it. For the first time since Rosalind had met her, Lady Victoria Ashcroft looked uncertain. Human. Vulnerable. She was not like us. Nathaniel stared at her. What does that mean? She doubted herself. Victoria's voice trembled. She questioned everything. Every decision. Every responsibility. So you criticized her? I advised her. Constantly. Victoria looked toward the floor. I thought I was helping. The confession hung in the air. No villainy. No grand conspiracy. Something far more believable and heartbreaking. A woman so convinced she knew best that she never realized the damage she caused. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Samuel looked furious. Lucy looked confused. Nathaniel simply looked tired. Deeply tired. And the letters, he asked. Victoria swallowed. After she died, I found them. Complete silence followed. You hid them. Victoria nodded once. I thought they would hurt you. Nathaniel laughed softly. The sound contained no amusement whatsoever. Instead, they stole 3 years from me. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Nathaniel. No. His voice remained calm. You made a choice that was not yours to make. Nobody spoke after that. Eventually, Victoria left the room. Slowly. Quietly. The confident woman who had arrived at Ravenshire Hall weeks earlier seemed gone. What remained was someone forced to confront the consequences of her own certainty. The days that followed brought healing. Not instant healing. Real healing rarely worked that way. Nathaniel uncovered Eleanor's portrait. For the first time in 3 years, sunlight touched the painting again. The entire family gathered in the gallery when it happened. Emma cried openly. Samuel pretended not to. Lucy waved enthusiastically at the image of her mother. Nathaniel stood before the portrait for a long time without speaking. Then he smiled. A real smile. Rosalind had never seen anything more bittersweet. News of the recovered letters spread quietly through society. Not the details. Only the truth that old misunderstandings had finally been resolved. People adjusted their opinions with remarkable speed. Society excelled at that when powerful individuals led the way. Several weeks later, London hosted one of the season's largest charity galas. Attendance was practically mandatory. Hundreds of guests filled the grand ballroom. Noble families arrived from across England. Politicians mingled with aristocrats. Musicians filled the air with elegant melodies. Rosalind entered on Nathaniel's arm. This time she felt different. Stronger. More certain. The whispers that once unsettled her no longer carried the same power. Because she knew who she was. More importantly, so did the people who mattered. The evening proceeded smoothly until a familiar group of society ladies gathered nearby. Lady Ashbourne stood among them. So did Lady Penhurst. Women who had once questioned her motives openly. Their conversation quieted as Rosalind approached. An awkward silence followed. Then something unexpected happened. Emma appeared. The 11-year-old had been speaking with friends her own age moments earlier. Now she crossed the ballroom directly toward Rosalind. Samuel followed. Lucy hurried behind them. Nathaniel watched from several feet away. Curiosity flickered in his eyes. Emma stopped beside Rosalind. Then she did something nobody anticipated. She took Rosalind's hand. Publicly. Deliberately. There you are. Rosalind smiled. Here I am. Emma nodded. Then she looked directly at the surrounding group of women. Every one of them. We have been looking for you. Lady Ashbourne blinked. How lovely. Emma's expression remained perfectly composed. She had inherited that talent from her father. Papa says we are leaving soon. Samuel immediately joined them. And Lucy wanted to say goodbye. Lucy nodded enthusiastically. Then she wrapped both arms around Rosalind. Right there in the middle of the ballroom. Right in front of everyone. You are coming home with us. Several nearby conversations stopped entirely. Emma lifted her chin slightly. Of course she is. The statement carried astonishing confidence. Lady Penhurst attempted a smile. You children seem very attached. Emma looked directly at her. Naturally. Silence followed. Then Emma delivered the final blow with all the elegance of a future duchess. She is already family. The ballroom seemed to stop breathing. Rosalind felt emotion rush through her so suddenly she could barely speak. Samuel stepped closer. Lucy refused to release her hand. Emma stood proudly at her side. And across the room, Nathaniel watched everything. His expression changed. Not dramatically. Not publicly. Yet Rosalind saw it. The walls he had carried for years were finally beginning to fall. Around them, society witnessed something impossible to dismiss. Impossible to gossip away. Impossible to question. 3 children had made their choice. Openly. Publicly. Without hesitation. And for the first time since arriving at Ravenshire Hall, Rosalind realized that every whisper, every accusation, every humiliation had already lost. Because the people whose trust mattered most had chosen her long ago. They were simply letting the rest of England know it. The carriage ride home from London felt entirely different from every journey that had come before. Lucy fell asleep before they had travelled 5 miles. Her head rested comfortably against Rosalind's shoulder while Captain Flopsy occupied a position of equal importance on her lap. Samuel sat opposite them, pretending to read while occasionally glancing over the top of his book. Emma watched the countryside through the window. Nathaniel remained beside her. The evening sunlight painted the landscape in shades of gold and amber. Fields stretched toward distant hills. Villages appeared and vanished. Life moved quietly beyond the carriage walls. Yet inside, something had changed. No one mentioned the ballroom. No one mentioned Emma's declaration. They did not need to. The moment remained alive in all their thoughts. Rosalind found herself looking out the window simply to avoid looking at Nathaniel. Which became increasingly difficult whenever she became aware of him doing exactly the same thing. Several times their eyes met unexpectedly. Several times neither looked away immediately. It was deeply inconvenient. By the time Ravenshire Hall appeared on the horizon, twilight had settled across Yorkshire. Lanterns glowed warmly in the windows. The great estate no longer looked lonely. Rosalind noticed that immediately. The feeling surprised her. Because it was true. Somewhere between her arrival and now, the house had changed. Or perhaps the people inside it had. After supper, Lucy was carried upstairs asleep in Nathaniel's arms. Samuel disappeared toward the library. Emma lingered near the drawing-room fireplace. Rosalind sat beside her while the flames cast soft shadows across the room. "You embarrassed half of London tonight." Emma looked delighted by the observation. "Only half." Rosalind laughed. "You are entirely too pleased with yourself." "I know." Emma glanced toward the fire. Then her expression softened. "I meant what I said." Rosalind's heart tightened. "I know." The girl was quiet for several moments. "Mama would have liked you." Emotion caught Rosalind completely off guard. She looked down at her hands. "That is very kind." "It is true." Emma's certainty never wavered. She liked people who listened. Rosalind swallowed carefully. Some compliments were difficult to answer. This was one of them. Emma eventually stood and kissed Rosalind's cheek before heading upstairs. The gesture was so casual. So natural. Yet it left Rosalind staring after her long after she disappeared. Later that evening, unable to sleep, Rosalind wandered toward the eastern terrace. Summer air drifted through the gardens. Moonlight silvered the lawns. The estate slept peacefully around her. She leaned lightly against the stone balustrade and closed her eyes. Footsteps sounded behind her. She did not need to turn around. Somehow she knew. Nathaniel stopped beside her. Not too close. Close enough. For a while neither spoke. The silence felt familiar now. Comfortable. Then Nathaniel looked toward the moonlit gardens below. Emma inherited her mother's courage. Rosalind smiled faintly. She certainly inherited something. A low laugh escaped him. The sound warmed her more than it should have. That too. Silence returned briefly. Then Nathaniel grew serious. "There is something I should have said weeks ago." Rosalind looked at him. Her pulse quickened unexpectedly. Nathaniel rarely struggled for words. Tonight he appeared to. "When you arrived." He paused. "I expected someone entirely different." Rosalind smiled slightly. "That does not sound promising." "It is not meant as an insult." His gaze met hers. "I thought you would view this marriage as an arrangement." She looked away toward the gardens. "At first, I did." "So did I." The honesty in his voice made her glance back immediately. Nathaniel leaned against the stone railing. Moonlight caught the silver near his temples. "I intended to fulfill an obligation." "And now?" The question escaped before she could stop it. For a moment he simply looked at her. Not as a duke. Not as a future husband fulfilling a duty. As a man making himself vulnerable. "Now I cannot imagine Ravenshire without you." Every breath seemed to leave her lungs at once. The night around them fell silent. Even the distant sounds of the estate seemed to fade. Nathaniel continued speaking before she could respond. "The children laugh again." His voice remained quiet. "Steady." Emma trusts again. Samuel smiles more. Lucy sleeps without asking whether everyone will leave. Emotion tightened his expression. "I did not realize how much was missing until it returned." Rosalind could barely breathe. Because she understood exactly what he meant. She had felt it too. The loneliness. The healing. The gradual return of hope. Nathaniel stepped closer. "Only a little." "Enough." "I told myself for years that loving someone again would somehow diminish what I felt for Eleanor." His eyes reflected moonlight. Grief. Gratitude. Acceptance. "I was wrong." Rosalind's heart ached for him. And for herself. And for all the years both of them had spent believing they understood what the future would look like. Nathaniel. Her voice trembled slightly. You do not owe me anything. I know. Not gratitude. I know. Not obligation. A faint smile touched his lips. Rosalind. He reached for her hand. Slowly. Giving her every opportunity to step away. She did not. His fingers closed gently around hers. Warm. Steady. Certain. I love you. The word settled between them. Simple. Honest. Entirely unadorned. Rosalind felt tears fill her eyes before she could stop them. Not because the declaration surprised her. Because it did not. Somewhere along the way she had fallen in love with the man who listened more than he spoke. The father who braided hair badly and kept trying anyway. The duke who carried grief with dignity and kindness. The man who chose truth when it would have been easier to remain comfortable. I love you too. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. Relief crossed his face so openly that she almost laughed through her tears. Then he smiled. A real smile. The sort that transformed him completely. Several weeks later, Ravenshire Hall prepared for a wedding. Not a political arrangement. Not a financial agreement. A wedding. The distinction mattered. Every corridor overflowed with flowers. Guests arrived from across England. Servants smiled more often than usual. Even Lady Agatha admitted the atmosphere felt magical. Victoria attended as well. Quieter now. More thoughtful. Time had not erased mistakes. Yet sincere remorse had begun building bridges where pride once stood. On the morning of the ceremony, Emma appeared in Rosalind's room carrying a small velvet box. What is this? Rosalind asked. Emma sat beside her. Papa asked me to give it to you. Curious, Rosalind opened the box. Inside rested a delicate silver locket. She recognized it immediately. Eleanor's. Emotion tightened her throat. Emma. The girl smiled. There is something inside. Rosalind opened the locket carefully. A tiny portrait of Eleanor occupied one side. On the other was a folded slip of paper. Rosalind unfolded it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was familiar. Eleanor's handwriting. If you are reading this, then someone has brought light back into the lives of those I love most. Thank you for loving them. Tears blurred the words. Rosalind pressed the note gently against her heart. Your mother was extraordinary. Emma nodded. I know. The ceremony took place beneath a clear summer sky. Family. Friends. Neighbors. Everyone gathered within the estate chapel where so much of the past had finally been understood. Nathaniel waited near the altar. Tall. Distinguished. Entirely incapable of hiding how happy he was. Rosalind nearly laughed when she saw him. The vows felt timeless. Sacred. Meaningful. Not because they were perfect. Because they were chosen. Every word. Every promise. Every hope. When the ceremony ended, applause filled the chapel. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows. Bells rang across the estate. And for the first time, Rosalind became the Duchess of Ravenshire. The celebration continued well into the evening. Music filled the gardens. Children ran across the lawns. Guests laughed beneath lanterns hanging from ancient trees. As twilight deepened, Rosalind slipped away briefly to the terrace overlooking the western grounds. The same terrace where Nathaniel had first told her he loved her. She stood quietly, watching the last traces of sunlight disappear beyond the hills. There you are. She turned. Nathaniel approached carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. I have been informed that abandoning one's own wedding celebration is discouraged. Rosalind accepted a glass. I needed a moment. Good. He stood beside her. So did I. They watched the darkening landscape together. Peace settled comfortably around them. Then footsteps sounded behind them. Familiar footsteps. Rosalind smiled before turning around. Emma stood there. Samuel beside her. Lucy clutching Captain Flopsy. "We were looking for you." Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "That sounds dangerous." "Probably," Samuel admitted. Lucy ignored him completely. She walked directly toward Rosalind. Then she stopped. For a brief moment, the little girl looked oddly nervous. "Can I ask something?" Rosalind knelt so they stood eye to eye. "Of course." Lucy twisted the rabbit's ear anxiously. "Now that you are married." Rosalind waited. The child took a breath. "Can I call you Mother?" The world seemed to stop. Rosalind felt tears rise instantly. Nathaniel looked away and cleared his throat suspiciously. Emma smiled. Samuel pretended he was not emotional at all. Which fooled absolutely no one. Rosalind opened her arms. Lucy launched herself forward immediately. "Yes." Her voice broke. "You may." Lucy hugged her tightly. Emma joined them seconds later. Samuel followed with the reluctance of a boy who wanted everyone to know he was only participating temporarily. Nathaniel eventually wrapped his arms around all of them. The 6 of them stood together beneath a sky full of stars. Not because fate demanded it. Not because society arranged it. Not because duty required it. They stood together because, one by one, they had chosen each other. And in the end, that made all the difference.